Hello, everyone. I'm Olympia. Thank you for being here with me in this wonderful place called Lights Out Library. And I have a great story to tell you. As you know, dogs evolved from wolves starting thousands of years ago. And since then, they have lived alongside humans all around the world. All breeds of domestic dogs are the result of domestication and selection process. Many of the most popular breeds adopted their modern characteristics in the 19th century, and we will talk about that. We'll see where wolves and dogs come from, their evolutionary history, how they live and bond together and with humans, and what domestication is. They are very sensitive beings, wolves and dogs alike. But dogs have evolved to be constantly emotionally available and to attach to their owners. This feeling of attachment is very serious to them. It is the center of their life, in fact, and it's not hard to make dogs happy. They are innocent creatures that have bred to become emotionally attached to us and live with us. I think it's important to respect that. And if you do, they will give you more affection and attention than any other animal companion ever could. So, the first half of this story is going to be about wolves, and in the second half, I'll tell you more about dogs. But first, allow me to take a few seconds of your time to let you know that we have a Patreon page for those of you who wish to and can support this project. Get more of it and listen ad-free on your favorite podcast app. Patreon is a platform that allows you to contribute directly to our work financially. Our least expensive tier is $3.50 per month, but it doesn't mean you will get less. We let people contribute what they wish or can, and everyone gets everything that is on our page, because the world is a better place when the sun shines for everyone. You will gain access to 21 exclusive episodes, and we add a new one every month. And you can listen and download all the episodes with and without background sounds. And as a token of gratitude, we offer advance releases to our patrons. We have added links to Patreon, as well as links to different streaming options, which may be better suited for you. You will find them in the description of the episode. But now, before we begin, if you wish to, you may close your eyes and allow yourself to forget about any worries. Assume a comfortable position. Maybe move a bit to settle. Take a long, deep, relaxing breath. And when you slowly exhale, feel your shoulders drop. Release the tension in your neck. Let your face soften and your jaw relax. Make sure your fingers are not clenched and that your legs are relaxed too. And allow the sound of my voice to guide you through this journey. And now, off we go. And before we talk about wolves and dogs specifically, let's go back in time, millions of years ago, to what we know of their ancestors. It is estimated that about 43 million years ago, two new groups of species began to emerge among carnivorous mammals, Feliforms and Caniforms. Feliforms are not our topic tonight, but we will have a story about them in the near future. Feliforms are the ancestors of cats, big and small. They evolved until the present into tigers, lions, leopards, and many more, including domestic cats. Many different species have appeared and gone extinct from 43 million years ago to the present. And the other group that emerged about at the same time were the caniforms. Caniforms are a large group, a large family that includes not only wolves and dogs, they have a lot of cousins on this branch of evolutionary tree, like bears, seals, raccoons, and foxes. The divergence between wolves and foxes happened more recently, 12 million years ago. Within caniforms, a subgroup of species, such a subgroup within a larger family is also called a genus, had appeared in North America, the first canines. The earliest members of the dog family were known as Leptocyon, a name that means slender dog. They were quite small, weighing about 4 to 5 pounds, and likely resembled modern foxes in appearance. With relatively weak jaws, they were not built for tackling large prey, and instead probably fed on small, quick animals as well as fruit. Much like today's foxes, they were most likely omnivores. Leptocyon evolved again and was replaced 12 million years ago by two distinct genera, Puedes, also known as foxes. There are many different species of them, and canini, canines. In this family, there are jackals, coyotes, and a latecomer around 3 to 4 million years ago, before present, the wolf. Before wolves, canids were small to medium-sized predators. They were not top predators at all. This spot was occupied by big cats like saber-toothed cats, or the ancestors of bears. The appearance of the wolf changed this. Other predators didn't disappear, but wolves were extremely successful as a group of species. There were several species of them, and around 1.8 million years ago, they multiplied and spread around the world, from Africa to north of China and North America. They invaded most of Asia and Europe too. This explosion is sometimes referred to as the wolf event, 1.8 million years ago, about at the time when our ancestors, Homo erectus, was appearing. Wolves already dominated a large part of the continents, and it is likely that to Homo erectus and its followers down to Homo sapiens, our species, there were always serious competition, and certainly a threat to their safety too, because wolves, from the start, were essentially carnivorous. Why were wolves so successful almost 2 million years ago and until recently? It is probably a combination of reasons. First, they were social animals. Not always. Not all wolves live in a pack. but their collaboration may have made them better hunters. They were also fast and powerful, becoming the largest canids to date. They were also able to adapt under almost all climates, including in the cold. They could thrive and reproduce faster than their competitors. And finally, there was an abundance of prey for them, including large prey like mammoths in the steppes of Eurasia or bison in North America. So from this wolf event to the relatively recent past, just a few thousand years ago, they became the top predator in many parts of the world by their numbers, if not by their individual strength, except in South America and sub-Saharan Africa, or on island worlds. Wolves became the one group of species humans had to compete with for space and hunting areas. Over hundreds of thousands of years, there was extensive gene exchange among different species of canids. Various wolf species could interbreed with one another, and also with coyotes and jackals, since they belonged to the same branch of the evolutionary tree and were genetically compatible. This resulted in widespread hybridization, a process that continues even today, despite the much smaller populations of wolves. But all wolves are hybrids, including with some dog DNA that was added to the mix in the past few thousand years. There are still various species of wolves alive. For example, the African golden wolf, or the Himalayan wolf, which is maybe one of the most ancient lineages of wolves. But the most important population, and the one the term wolf generally refers to, is the gray wolf, Canis lupus, which is native to Eurasia and North America. There are many subspecies of gray wolves. As I said, all wolves alive are hybrids, but they are close enough to form one single species. What differentiates wolves from other canids physically is the size. They are bigger, 80 to 90 pounds typically. Their jaws and their bites are much more powerful, and they also have less pointed ears, a shorter torso, and a longer tail than other canids. In comparison to other wild canids, wolves are also much more social. More often than not, they live in groups, and they have a communication system between them, which is very advanced. Wolf communication involves a wide range of signals, including vocalizations, body posture, touch, and scent. If you have dogs, you'll recognize many of these behaviors, as domestic dogs have retained much of this communication system. Through their posture, they signal their level of aggression or assertiveness. In such cases, they hold their bodies as tall as possible and raise the hair along their neck and back. If they also move slowly and deliberately, it is often a sign that an attack may be imminent. In contrast, when they are submissive, they carry their bodies low, their fur lies flat, and they lower their ears and tails to signal submission to another wolf. One may even roll onto its back and allow the other to sniff it. There are many variations between these signals, and wolves are highly skilled at reading them. They also have greeting behaviors, such as licking each other's faces, and their interactions, like gentle jaw wrestling or cheek rubbing, can express friendliness or reinforce social hierarchy. In addition to body language, wolves communicate through sounds, often howling to gather the pack before and after a hunt. There is also the well-known idea, let's call it a legend, that wolves howl at the moon. Though this is more of a cliche and not supported by observation. They do bark at times and growl, which are the forms of communication we notice most because we can easily hear them. But their communication goes far beyond that. Their sense of smell plays a major role as well. Wolves have scent glands on their faces, lips, backs, and even between their toes. Each wolf carries a distinct scent signature that others can recognize. They also mark their territory with urine, much like domestic dogs. The exact purpose of this behavior is still debated, but researchers agree it helps establish boundaries, as wolves are highly territorial. A pack defines and occupies its own area, which it defends by threatening and, if necessary, attacking intruders. However, it is not entirely straightforward. Territorial boundaries are not fixed, they shift over time. Observations show that wolves mark more frequently and intensely in unfamiliar areas or places where other wolves' scents are present, as if attempting to overwrite them. Wolves are highly social animals that constantly communicate with one another and live in organized groups. This social nature is one of the things that makes them relatable to us. Although they remain wild animals, fear of wolves has declined in many Western countries, largely because people are no longer regularly exposed to them, and they have disappeared from much of their former range. Gray wolves are not currently considered an endangered species. Their global population is estimated at around 300,000 individuals, mainly in Canada and Russia. However, this is far fewer than a few centuries ago, when their numbers likely reached into the millions. In the fight for dominance with humans, wolves have lost, but there is a long history to this relationship between wolves and humans, dating back from prehistoric times in all regions where it was present: Asia, Europe, and North America. The wolf has historically played a prominent role in mythology, legend, and folklore due to its predatory characteristics. Frequently associated with danger and destruction, the wolf also served as a symbol for warriors in a positive context, while at other times representing figures such as the devil, chaos, or death. Nowadays, attacks on humans are very rare because wolves and humans tend to live far apart, and also because after thousands of years, wolves have learned to be afraid of humans. More often than not, they have turned into prey in their encounters with humans, and generation after generation, this has left a mark on their natural behavior. This was not always so. For instance, in Europe, during the Middle Ages, wolf populations started to decline, whereas before that, they were far more common. In ancient times, wolf attacks posed a significant threat to people who were alone, such as shepherds or travelers. For thousands of years, the presence of wolves was the primary reason for the loss of cattle. Domesticated animals like sheep, goats, and bovines cannot defend themselves against them. So wolves would never attack a whole village, but still, they were a real threat. And it is important to remember this in order to understand how deep-rooted the fear or even the hate of wolves became. Long before fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood, wolves appeared as villains in fables and literature. Aesop, for example. Aesop was a Greek author. He is mainly remembered for his fables, and wolves appear in several of them, including his most famous one that you know about, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. The expression to cry wolf, which means to give a false alarm, comes from this well-known fable. In the story, a shepherd amuses himself by fooling villagers into thinking a wolf is attacking his sheep. Eventually, when a real wolf shows up and he calls for help, the villagers think he's lying again and ignore him, leading to the wolf eating all the sheep. The lesson of the tale is that people who lie are entrusted, even when they're finally telling the truth. Folk tales with wolves are plenty, and not just in the Western tradition. For example, for peoples living in the steppes and the forests of Asia and Native Americans in North America, wolves were important. For the Pawnee, who historically lived in what is now Kansas and Nebraska, the wolf was said to be the first animal brought to earth. When humans first killed the wolf, they were punished with destruction and the loss of immortality. The story explains the fall from grace of mankind, an equivalent to the original sin in Christian tradition, except the apple and the snake are replaced with the killing of a wolf. The Pawnee and the Blackfoot, too, call the Milky Way the Wolf's Trail. And very far from them, in Central Asia, in Siberia, in Mongolia, wolves were also central in a religion called Tengrism. It was believed that wolves were the only other creatures apart from humans that worshipped a deity. When howling, they were actually praying to Tengri, the primary god of their pantheon. Among nomadic tribes, be it in Asia or America, wolves were feared, but had a somewhat more positive image, it seems. They were also respected and sometimes worshipped. Maybe there was a social and economic reason for it. Nomadic tribes practiced herding, and they suffered from the wolf's predation, but maybe to a lesser extent than pastoral sedentary societies. They also had a very different approach to nature and the status of animals. First, the idea that the land could belong to individuals or a small group of people was alien to them. So the concept of animal intruders that would live on the territory of humans didn't really make sense in their worldview. Tribes and clans had territories, and there were wars too. But the nomadic lifestyle and the absence of property of land made their relation to nature very different to the one that appeared in sedentary societies. And yet another difference with the Western tradition when it comes to the relationship with wild animals is that in the West, and it began long ago, maybe with the Greeks, nature is perceived as a resource for humans. Humankind is entitled to use it, tame it, and transform it. The Christian tradition only cemented this view of nature. It is written in the book of Genesis that nature exists only to support humanity, that humans must cultivate it, and that animals were created for their own purposes. The power of this statement gets a bit lost today because we have reached a point where we perceive ourselves as a risk to wildlife in general. We know that many wild species are endangered or have already disappeared because of our human activity, taking of the land, or the exploitation as resources. But 2,000 years ago, or just 600 years ago, in the Middle Ages, things looked very different. And the supremacy of humans over nature was not perceived as a fact like today. There were wild animals close to most human communities and settlements, and life did look like a daily struggle against nature. So the statement that nature was for human beings to take and dominate was at the same time comforting and appealing. It just couldn't be understood as a threat to nature. From prehistoric times to the Middle Ages, wolves were the embodiment of dangerous wildlife at the time. In most of Europe and in large parts of the Middle East were large monotheistic traditions and worldviews formed. So in none of them, be it Judaism, Christianity, Islam, did wolves have a good reputation. For example, in Christianity, they are mentioned more than 10 times in the Bible, and always as metaphors for danger or destructiveness. The wolf is an enemy of flocks, and by extension, a metaphor for evil lurking and threatening the innocent. A lot of the symbolism in the Old and New Testament revolves around flocks, the Good Shepherd, agriculture, fishing. This is logical because at the time, the dominant culture in the region was pastoral and agrarian. But of course, wolves didn't come out of this with a good image. And there are concepts in the New Testament, like the wolf in sheep's clothing, to warn against false prophets that are obviously a metaphor. It is not about an actual wolf, but it contributed to giving wolves a bad name in Western culture. Now, the fight against wolves that went as far as their extermination in many regions of the world did not happen because of religious texts or religious traditions. Like in Europe, wolves were also hunted in China and in India. It happened because they were a threat and an obstacle to human societies. But it's important to understand how negative the image of wolves became. For a long time in Western societies, wolves were seen also as borderline devilish. I made a story about werewolves that elaborated on this. Their image began to be restored only several centuries after the danger had disappeared, for the most part. Their rehabilitation began at the end of the 19th century. It's recent. And one important work here is The Jungle Book by Kipling. In The Jungle Book, wolves are portrayed as a small society of sentient animals with intelligence and feelings and respect for their elders. In the 20th century, there was a complete reversal of perception, with books and later films that present wolves as cooperative and noble. The most successful one is probably Never Cry Wolf, which is not liked much by experts or specialists because it is supposed to be a memoir, but it is largely fictional, and it is full of factual inaccuracies and idealization. But still, in recent decades, there has been a rise in sympathy for wolves, accompanying the rising preoccupation for the preservation of wildlife. And maybe another thing that helped make them relatable is our connection to their brothers, dogs. So let's talk about dogs now. We'll talk a bit about a few specific breeds. The Alaskan Malamute, for example. Malamutes are among the dogs that most resemble wolves. Sometimes they are used in movies to play this role. There are differences in appearance, though. Wolves' chests are narrower, a bit like for German Shepherds, whereas the Malamute's chest is more rounded and wider. They also have thicker legs than wolves, and their eyes are brown or dark, as opposed to yellow or gold eyes for wolves. They also carry their tail higher over their back. A wolf would carry it low. And the biggest difference, obviously, is the character. A wolf will always be suspicious of humans, always hyperactive and very hard to train. It is possible for humans to befriend a wolf or a pack of wolves with a lot of patience and understanding, but it's hard. And there will always be an unpredictable wild component to wolves' personalities. In contrast, the Malamute dog is naturally friendly to humans. They are trainable and very laid back and relaxed when nothing is going on. And yet, apart from their appearance, Malamutes also retain a lot from the wolf. We talked about wolf communication earlier. Dog communication follows the same lines, the same stimuli and responses. They also are social animals that can live alone but have a tendency to regroup in packs, inside which they establish a hierarchy, just like wolves. How can they be so similar in some respects and yet so different? The answer is because of domestication. From a genetic point of view, wolves and dogs are almost identical. And actually, with a standard DNA sample, it is possible to know it comes from an animal of the genus Canis, but very difficult to know whether it is from a wolf or a German Shepherd or a poodle. Their genes are extremely close, and only very tiny modifications have been identified. Now, it is not uncommon to have a very similar genome within the same species. For example, if you take DNA samples from two human beings, whatever their race or age or place of origin, more than 99% of it is identical. And it makes sense because the genes contain a lot of information that is common to animals in general, like the structure of the cells, their specialization, their reproduction, or common to a species in particular, the architecture of the body, with its organs and how they work together, including the brain and nervous system that will determine its cognitive potential and a few traits of behavior. And yet, we have these very small differences in their genes. Human beings can look quite different from one another. Dogs come from wolves, but not exactly the wolves that live on Earth nowadays. We saw earlier that many different species of wolves walked the Earth over hundreds of thousands of years. Over thousands of years, dogs and wolves continued to interbreed, which kept their genes closely related. Both modern dogs and wolves share a common wolf ancestor that lived over 15,000 years ago, around the time when dogs were first domesticated. However, this shared ancestor no longer exists today. Domestication of dogs began in prehistoric times. We don't know exactly when, at least 14,000 years ago, because the remains of a dog buried beside humans were discovered and dated. But it could be earlier, possibly thousands of years earlier. We don't know where it began either, but the most likely regions are believed to be East Asia or Central Asia or Europe. This means that the domestication of dogs began before agriculture or before the domestication of any other species. We don't actually know how it began. It is possible to imagine that wild wolves were captured and fed by humans, forming a companionship with them, but we have no proof of that. Another possibility is that groups of wolves began to follow groups of humans because they left carcasses of large animals behind them, and the wolves could feed on them. Then the groups would have lived closer and closer together, humans and wolves getting used to each other, hunting and defending against predators together naturally fostered it, because humans and wolves alike were the two predators with the most developed social behavior. In any case, the first wolves to live among humans were tamed rather than domesticated. Taming is the training of a wild animal to make it tolerant of human presence, to suppress its urge to escape or to attack in the presence of a human being. A more suitable term for describing how humans and wolves relate is socialization. Socialization occurs when a wild animal gets accustomed to humans and starts interacting with them as though they were fellow members of its own species. When people spend time among wolves, for example, wolves will get used to their presence and eventually accept them into companionship or integrate them into their pack. Domestication is yet another thing. It is a process in which over multiple generations humans take control of the reproduction and care of another species and transform it to suit their needs. It is not limited to animals. Plants were domesticated too. They were selected over thousands of generations to secure a supply of food or other resources. Domestication of animals started with dogs, followed by goats, sheep, pigs, horses, birds, and even honeybees or silkworms thousands of years ago. In fact, there are far more domesticated species than most people realize. Generation after generation, the selection of individuals that are allowed to breed favors certain characteristics. Individuals with a genetic predisposition to be friendly and social to humans are favored, and this becomes the norm for the new domestic species. In recent years, specific genes that favored the predisposition to form bonds with humans have been identified in dogs. These variations may also possibly happen to a wolf too, but this is exceptional. However, there are stories of wild wolves that are naturally friendly and inclined to establish contact with humans. It is extremely rare, but it happens. In dogs, this has become the norm because of selection as generations pass. The observable characteristics of domesticated animals tend to change: their appearance, their behavior. These traits are called phenotypes in genetics. In the case of dogs, the biggest phenotypic changes are in their behavior. They become increasingly docile and emotionally dependent on humans. But there were changes in morphology too. The shape of tails and ears, for example, floppy ears that you wouldn't find in a wild animal, the color of the fur, a reduction in the tooth size. Another frequent effect of domestication is a prolongation of juvenile behavior. If you have a dog or even a cat, you probably notice that they remain effusive and playful until they are very old. This behavior exists among the young and wild animals too, but it tends to disappear, and they become more mature when they are adults. Over many generations, domesticated animals, especially pets, have been bred to retain juvenile behaviors. While not every dog exhibits this trait, most do. This is where their experience of life also plays in the formation of their character, their personality. There is an old debate about what is innate and what is acquired in the formation of an individual's personality. Maybe it doesn't make that much sense to say that one dominates the other, or even that it's 50-50. The formation of an individual results from the interaction of the acquired with its genetic predispositions. So, in a sense, it is at the same time entirely innate and entirely acquired. In the case of dogs, their domestication makes them highly inclined to be friendly towards humans and form bonds with them, but only if they have been accustomed to human presence and contact shortly after their birth. A dog born in the wild, it happens sometimes, who has reached adulthood without contacts with humans will act a lot like a wild animal because it has not received the human imprint early. Its offspring will remain domesticated because it is genetic, and its offspring may have a totally different behavior provided they have been in contact with humans. And likewise, the young of a socialized wild animal will be wild because in one generation and without selection, there is no predisposition to be friendly to humans. It is recommended that if you have a litter of puppies, you spend a bit of time with them when they are just a few days or weeks old, and also to introduce them to another human. It can be another member of the family, anyone, because this first contact with different human beings will be very important in their social interactions later. They need to become used to the presence of humans at an early age. The acquired part goes much further. Dogs also need to be educated to live among us. They are well disposed to learn, but they have to be taught in a way that is understandable by them. Some are easier to educate than others, as we are all well aware, including within the same breed, because they do have different personalities or attention spans. The one factor that makes them open to learning and obeying is that they want to please the humans they are attached to. Giving your dog commands or setting boundaries doesn't make it unhappy. Dogs thrive on knowing how to please you, understanding their place in the household, receiving recognition for good behavior, and getting attention so that they know they matter to you. I think the understanding that dogs have deep feelings and respond to affection is generally well understood among dog owners, but it's an error to go as far as treating them like humans because they are not. They ignore feelings like shame or guilt. The only thing that makes them regret having done something is the fear of being found out and displeasing you. But they cannot feel bad for moral reasons about a mistake they made, or even remember it a long time. They cannot hold grudges. They cannot hide their intentions. That's why it is not recommended to punish a dog if you don't catch it in the act, because it cannot understand the punishment for something it did an hour before. For example, when your dog destroys something in your home and you find out later and you show it, show what he has destroyed and asking, "What is this? Why did you do that?" It may apparently act guilty and look down or lie on its back, but this is not because it understands it did bad. It is because dogs perceive that you are displeased or angry just by your attitude, but they don't know why, and they will adopt a submissive position as a response. So consistency, patience, and an understanding of how they think are the best tools to educate them well. And once again, a dog doesn't feel bad for being in a submissive position. They are just satisfied and more at peace when they know their place. Now, the hierarchy in a pack of social animals is never fixed once and for all. It changes over time and depends on their character. Dogs test it from time to time between them or with you. If you have more than one dog, there will usually be a dominant one. It will be the first greeted, or even the first to be given a treat or fed. It may even regularly put the other dog or dogs in their place if they cross a line. It usually isn't a very aggressive display, just a tiny growl to assert its place, and the other dogs usually comply. Sometimes one might even appear to be bullied, but you may feel like you need to intervene. But it's usually better to let them figure out their business, unless it's truly aggressive. Usually, if you don't let them figure it out, the aggression might be worse in the long run. More often than not, these displays of rank are short-lived, and they will all be playing or cuddling after a few minutes. So spending time with your dog is important. When they are with you, by default, they are happy. Playing with them or going out for a walk is very good, but just letting them be in your presence is fine too. When I work on my stories, generally I have Penny, a cute Cavapoo, lying under my desk, and she loves that. While some dogs enjoy being groomed, others may not be as enthusiastic. Many breeds tend to dislike bath time, though gentle brushing can be pleasant for certain dogs. When dogs feel physically comfortable, it boosts their mood and energy. They'll appreciate you even more. If they come to connect these positive feelings with your care. Now, why do some dogs dislike baths? It seems it's because the experience can feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, and overwhelming to their senses. The sound and pressure of running water, the slippery surface of a tub, and being handled or restrained can all create stress, especially for dogs that prefer routine and control over their environment. In addition, bathing washes away their natural scent and replaces it with unfamiliar smells, which can be unsettling, since dogs rely heavily on scent and comfort and identity. If a dog has had a negative experience in the past, such as getting water in its ears or soap in its eyes, it may also associate bath time with discomfort and try to avoid it. We can also talk about different dog breeds and where they come from. This is such an interesting topic. The diversity of traits and abilities of phenotypes, as we've seen before, is huge among dogs, more than any other species of mammals. Some breeds demonstrate particular skills. It can be in herding, in scent detection, in guarding, retrieving. So how did this appear? And why did so many different breeds of dogs diverge so much in appearance? Originally, dogs closely resembled wolves. Over thousands of years, domestication gradually altered both their looks and their behavior. Since humans played a role in regulating their breeding, various dog breeds emerged based on local needs and intended purposes. We know that 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, greyhound-type dogs existed because they were depicted on pottery and paintings from India and Egypt for protection and hunting. Mastiff-type dogs were bred too since antiquity. Another important ancient type of dog is Spitz. The Spitz type comes from Arctic regions, Siberia, Alaska, the north of Canada, and they were bred to help humans in three ways: hunting, herding, and pulling sleds. Huskies, Malamutes, Canadian Eskimo dogs, the Akita from northern Japan, Finnish and Swedish Lapphund. They are all Spitz. For thousands of years, there was selection, but very little attention was paid to the standardization of breeds with well-defined characteristics. To be considered belonging to a particular breed, a dog needs to have certain characteristics, but also be able to pass on these same characteristics to its offspring. So the stabilization of a breed's characteristics can take several generations of carefully controlled reproduction. All ancient types of dogs were not powerful or fast either. For example, an ancient type is the Chihuahua. It comes from Mexico, and in pre-Columbian times, the ancestors of modern Chihuahuas were already very small. Dogs were raised as pets and possibly as food. They also served as living heating pads for people who were ill or injured. So there were already very different types of dogs 200 years ago. But a big movement to define, standardize, and create new breeds began in the 19th century. It happened about at the same time in various countries, but Britain was leading this movement. Many of today's popular dog breeds, including Labradors, Beagles, Corgis, and Yorkshire Terriers, among others, were established in the UK. These breeds typically originated from older domestic dog types or imported animals. For example, the ancestors of Labradors were brought to the UK from Newfoundland, from Canada, and probably the majority of dogs kept as pets nowadays descend from relatively small groups of dogs gathered in the 19th century. To define these new breeds, kennel clubs were created to watch the standards of each breed. As of today, pretty much all the most popular breeds in Europe and America originated from this selection process in the 19th century. For example, in the U.S., according to the American Kennel Club, the most popular breed had been the Labrador. But in 2026, the most popular breed has shifted to the French Bulldog. They are a small breed created in France in the 1800s by crossing bulldogs from England and small Parisian dogs that were specialized in hunting rats. The second one now is the Labrador, sending the Golden Retrievers to third most popular, a breed that originated in the UK. The German Shepherd is ranked number 4. The German Shepherd may look like an ancient breed because it has a wolf-like appearance, but it is modern and dates from the very end of the 19th century. The German Shepherd was fixed as a breed by mixing different types of shepherd dogs from various regions in Germany. If you haven't yet, you can look at the origins of your dog's breed or breeds if it's mixed. Every breed, whether large or small, has its own unique history and dedicated individuals behind it. It is also helpful to be aware of the typical issues each breed might face so you can be ready for them. We've come to the end of our little journey tonight. I hope you enjoyed this adventure, and I invite you to discover and learn more. Now you can let go and sleep. Or if you're not sleepy yet, you may pick another story from my ever-growing library. And until we meet again, good night. Sleep well.